Okay, and welcome back to Fast Performance then. My name is Tim Davies, and this evening we have a fantastic guest to get on here. I've been meaning to get him on for a very, very long period of time, okay? And he has agreed to come on to FJP, to the Warrior Wednesday, to talk to you about justice in the military, especially the British military. Okay, so Graham is the principal for Justice for Troops, all right, when exists to support armed forces personnel who are suffering military injustice. So the worst form of injustice is pretend justice. That's a quote on Graham's website by Plato. So pretend justice, then, let me explain here. I've been reading about this over the last, weeks and months. It's the current deliberate approach to complaints adopted by the Ministry of Defence. Initially, it seems just like incompetence, but after careful reviews of evidence, we are confident it is deliberate, willful, obstructive, sham justice delivered against its own people. Now, you know how I am, guys. I speak to a lot of people from the military, still in, people coming out, people coming and doing my spin recovery course, by the way. I'm running another one starting on the first week of March, and it is full. It's a course for men only. A spin, self-esteem, purpose, identity, negativity, all right? But if you are interested, by all means, I'll chat to you about it at the end as well. Get in contact, Tim at Fast Jet Performance, and I can try and find a course to place you on in the future. 12-week course. Guys, let me bring out Graham. I've got some great questions to ask him tonight. He is a man who is dedicated to getting over the injustices within the military. You cannot say that this is not the number one thing that we should be doing at the moment. So welcome to the podcast then, Mr. Graham House. There we go. Should be live. How are you?
Tim, we're humbled to be with you. Thank you for inviting us on. It's really charming of you. Thank you.
Not at all. Graham, look, it's brilliant for you to be here. I really do appreciate it. I must be someone who reads everything you write. I try and follow as much as I can, as close as possible. And to be honest with you, some of it is actually deeply complex. And so I do struggle, but I know you've got the answers. Can you just tell the viewers then, just briefly, you know, what is your background and why are you so invested in Justice for Troops?
I briefly, just to subtly change the narrative there, Tim. We're not really interested in injustice because life's full of it. We're interested in people and performance. People in an organization that we hold dear to our collective heart, and performance where we're trying to encourage it to deliver to it, given the current constraints, operational, fiscal, whatever they might be. So it's the injustices, life is full of that. It's more a focus of the impact of it on people. And how do we ameliorate that risk and therefore lots of solutions to how we can do that better, really to improve the performance of defence. So we never set up to be overly critical or dismantling by intent. It was really to contribute to a collective need that I think has been recognised for some time. So my background briefly, I joined the military in the junior ranks. I had the world's best education, because I don't really remember going to school. I traveled the world with my parents, met people from all over the world in different languages and different cultures. I came back to the UK, hit a bit of a brick wall with what I thought was a rigid educational system that didn't fit for me, didn't do well academically, joined the military as in the junior ranks, went to night school to get the qualifications that I needed to fly, and was incredibly lucky and fortunate to be invited for pilot training. So that's really where my professional background kicked off into the world I now enter in. I was privileged to fly the front line for a number of tours, a lot of headquarters tours, headquarters air, NATO tours, and the MOD. And the thing that surprised me in the MOD, typical problem in the MOD. I just got to the MOD in support of a policy area, in the capability area that affects everyone. And I'd been there for about 2 months and was just trying to understand the problem before I could understand how I might be able to contribute to a solution. And after 2 months, I got a call from the headquarters, my poster, the HR team, for those who aren't familiar. They said, "Oh, well done, we're floating you for a squadron command for the new jet back home." And what? This is all I ever wanted. This is like my boyhood ambition. I can go from London to Scotland, my home, on a fleet that is part of my character, to bring in a new aircraft, which is amazing. And in squadron command, this is just, it's like winning the World Cup.
Yeah.
But I turned it down. I declined it because that is exactly the problem. I just got into a policy area to contribute to a complex issue. And after 2 months, they said, you're now posted. Well, that is the problem. In this headquarters, it's not just a Department of State, it's a strategic headquarters. And the military rulement is continuous to meet a career profile and not necessarily to develop good policy that impacts thousands of people. So I declined it, which caused consternation, as you can imagine, in the headquarters. But 2 years later, I got selected for not squadron command, but station command of a unit I thought was shut, which is another story. And the minute I arrived, I could see, as anyone would have seen, very significant duty of care issues that impacted on our people, from cadets to senior staff. To cut a long story short, something happened one evening, despite me raising the risk about duty of care through the chain of command, which I thought they would treat or terminate, but they tolerated it. Our team was reduced because of the financial problems within defence at the time, which gave us a bigger risk for the duty of care. And I got a call from, I think you're a father, I believe.
Negative, not me, no.
But you know young children in your family? I think you've got a heavy...
Yeah, I've got nieces, nephews coming out my ears and juggling with them, you know what I mean?
Imagine you're in your 40s, you happen to be in a position of responsibility, someone phones up who confesses to be the mother of an air cadet, aged 13, and she says, my daughter has just been on your unit for a camp and she was raped by her instructor, and I want to know what you're going to do about it.
You had this? This happened to you? Jeez, seriously.
Yeah, and
that's a police matter, sure. That's a civilian police matter.
Well, no, it becomes really complicated then.
Oh.
I didn't know that. But what's useful perhaps just to talk through my decision-making process and my thinking process. The minute she said, what am I going to do? Whilst I'm listening to what she's saying, I thought, this can't be true. It was just into denial. And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, it can't be quite the way you said it. It can't be true the way you said it. Yeah. There'll be a reasonable response to this. And then the third base I got to was, well, if this is true, how's this going to impact on me and my career? Because I'm supposed to be in command of this lot.
That's right.
And it was the fourth base I got to that effectively said, no, that's exactly why you're here, to pick up these issues and address them as best as you can to get them sorted. That was my natural sense of value. It's just when I took it to the chain of command, that's where it hit me hard. Because the response from the chain of command that took several months to get through was, it's highly inconvenient because of the 70th anniversary of the Air Cadet organization to have this allegation hit the streets. So effectively, don't support it, don't initiate an investigation, bury it. That was not working for me. And I should have gone. All the focus was to go through the military judicial process because that's the jurisdictional lead is the military.
Okay.
I rejected that. I found a QR that said, actually, I can do this through the civil process. I'm going to do the civil. I did it through the civil process. I initiated an inquiry with the civil police. It led to a Crown Court. It led to a conviction, and the RAF instructor went to prison. Jeez. Shortly after that, I was removed from command and later had a label of high maintenance. And it was that bit and a few contributing factors that, you know what, I'm cool with that. If high maintenance is what you're going to do to someone who refuses to acquiesce to what I think is a clear wrong, I'll contest that. Yeah. Because it led me to believe, Tim, that actually you're actually incentivizing the command element to do the wrong thing to pursue their own career profile.
That's right.
And that would reflect a pressure in the headquarters where they themselves are under those pressures to do the wrong thing and tell the 4-star, actually, not the necessary rich picture that the 4-star needs for the strategic direction of defense. They're probably incentivized to, dare I say, soften the narrative from the front line, adjust it to meet a headquarters need, and therefore not necessarily a defence need. And this really hit home, Tim. I was unlucky enough, to put it bluntly, with a sudden notice directive from CDS and the Secretary of State and the Prime Minister to come to my unit, that effectively late afternoon, they're coming tomorrow for 5 hours, and they wanted from me my tactical position on their strategic policy, new government, new Secretary of State.
Jeez.
Okay. Right, I'll just keep this simple. I'll treat them as people. There'll be no PowerPoint. It will be tea and some butties and we'll chat.
Yeah, it's nice.
Which is my style.
Yeah.
The PM comes, Secretary of State, CDS, most of the cabinet, the internal cabinet, the security cabinet. And that conversation led to something I won't forget in the context of the allegation that later came my way, when CDS said, and I quote, "What we're missing at the top is the 20,000-foot overview of what's going on at the bottom."
Well, yeah, obviously.
That hit me hard with, well, that is effectively my job. My job, undeclared, unwritten, is to make sure that at the top, they know the ground truth of what's really going on, because I know through the staffing process and the command process, these things can get twisted, they can get softened. By the time I'm saying this is a problem, when it gets to the top, they're saying it's okay. And that to me was an ethical issue in the way defence operates as an organisation. So that's broadly my background. It was just when the person went to prison, I made a promise to the cadet and her mother that I would orientate my lifetime to do my bit to try and recover everything that experience taught me, which was wrong, true to the values that I've been brought in and the values that I think reflect. So I pivoted really from what I wanted to do in life to something I didn't necessarily want to do in life, but something I had knowledge that I could apply to try and contribute to others in those vulnerable positions. So that's how we set up Justice for Troops. It wasn't with any other intent apart from recognise in 2021 the Armed Forces Bill, which is upon us now, quantify the issue that I recognised in command, especially as the deciding officer in complaints and a respondent in complaints, and join the dots up so that if there is an issue, we can present it. If there isn't an issue, we can forget it. There is an issue, and we presented it through all means possible. So that was really the genesis of why I set up Justice for Troops. It was no other reason apart from how many others out there are there going through a tough time that haven't been heard. Yeah. And how do we represent them and how do we give them a voice? It was really an empowerment process.
No, I fully get that. I mean, you must get some, I mean, I get a lot of, well, we all get hate, don't we, if we're online. We've got a website somewhere if we're trying to do something. I mean, I'm a big supporter of women, so I speak to a lot of women going into the military or not going to the military as well. I do a lot with ethnic diversity or ethnic people as well. And I do as much as I can with young white boys, but they are probably the left behind generation at the moment. So I get a lot of hate, a lot of stick online, and you power through it, bounces off. You must get a lot of that though from people you probably wouldn't expect to, I would have thought. So is that the case?
I'm cool. Yeah, I'm cool with that. Can I bring you back a bit in time and actually put an aviation context on this as well, which might time better with your viewers. To me, it's about values-based thinking and stick to that principle. And there was something the Queen said. So you've served, I haven't flown with you, or I don't believe I've operated with you, but we have served in Her Majesty's Armed Forces.
Yep.
She's probably, I guess, the most respected person on the planet.
Yeah.
And therefore, what she says should probably have some importance. And she said this in 1992, which really has been a driving force for me. It's only a short paragraph, but I'll read it.
Yeah.
And she said, quote, "There can be no doubt, of course, that criticism is good for people and institutions that are part of public life. No institution should expect to be free from the scrutiny of those who give it their loyalty and support, not to mention those who don't. This sort of questioning can also act, and it should do so, as an effective engine for change." So in response to anyone who gives me a hard time, I'm cool with it, because that allows me to understand their position. It educates me in a wider context, and criticism. When it comes to criticism, and you've been and you are a fast jet flying background, you will understand, and I will understand, and many of your audience will understand. When it comes to a debrief on a fast jet squadron or a training squadron or an operational squadron, the aircrew debrief is pretty brutal.
Yeah, it is.
And for your audience, and you've been an instructor as well, why is it brutal, Tim?
Well,
what is the point of that?
I speak to a lot of medical people as well, and they ask about this. So I was just speaking to a doctor the other day, in fact, talking about this. Medicine is catching up, I think, to be fair, with aviation. But aviation is pretty black and white, isn't it? The facts rule, not feelings in aviation. If you get it wrong, you die. So in a debrief, you are very black and white. You're blunt. We're not hating on people, nothing like that. It's nothing. There's nothing personal. It's just open, because you've got to get the facts out. You've got to get the truth out, because that's going to keep people alive the next day.
That was my upbringing. I grew up in a world where, and I never took offense to criticism, because it's making me better as a person, as an operator, and as an officer. It's making me a better person. So I absorb it by definition. And that actually, Her Majesty is saying, get over it, soak it up. She's saying that. And it comes back then, the top level piece of policy that is worth just reflecting on here. I don't know if you've ever heard of the offer of service.
Well, I'm familiar with it. Yeah, I've got the lines in front of me. No,
it's worth just reminding your audience and revisiting it regularly, especially if you're serving. This is your Bible. It says, it's just a short paragraph, people lie at the heart of operational capability. Attracting and retaining the right numbers of capable, motivated individuals to deliver defense outputs is critical. This is dependent upon maintaining a credible and realistic offer that earns and retains the trust of people in defense. In order to achieve this, all personnel, not some of them, all personnel must be confident that not only will they be treated fairly, but also their families will be treated properly, and that service veterans and their dependents will be respected and appropriately supported. Those are strong words. And it doesn't say, would you mind, or you're invited to, or if you may. It actually says will and must. It's a directive.
It is a directive, and I don't realise that.
The words that I focus on there, Tim, are in all walks of life: trust, treated fairly, regardless of your rank, regardless of your position. I don't actually have an interest in rank status or star status or junior status. I came from the ranks. I have an interest in treating people with respect, listening to what they've got to say, and understanding what they're trying to tell me. Otherwise, if I can't do that, I'm never going to be a good operator. I'm never going to be good in the air, and I certainly won't be good in command, on the understanding that command is about supporting your people, true to that offer. And that's really why that mother who rang me, it hit hard when effectively she was telling me, I trusted you with my daughter, and you mucked it up. That's what she was saying. And that's why when I went to the 2-star about this, I didn't appreciate, or neither did I expect or support, it's an inconvenient truth. I don't expect that. I don't accept that, and I wouldn't support that. And I certainly didn't appreciate, after 7 months of trying to see him, my operational commander, my AOC as a base commander, I didn't expect being refused an audience with my AOC. That was, to me, a problem. And it was a problem for me, Tim, because the 2-star, apart from everything else that's on their plate, which I can imagine is pretty huge, the fundamental role of the AOC, in my mind, and I've been a bag carrier for one, it's about assurance. Assurance. Because the 4-star's role, in my view, is to ensure government that you've got a defence force that's capable of whatever directive you need. It's an insurance policy. It's part of a diplomatic arm. If you've got poor assurance, and the 4-star doesn't know that, we're going to be embarrassed when the politician presses to test.
Absolutely.
And that comes right back. It comes right back to my aircrew training with brilliant people who they gave me a hard time for the reasons you state. It made us better and it kept us safe. So this isn't really about complaints that I'm interested in, because life's full of them. I'm interested in safety and the impact of that on the organization as a whole and the people in it who serve. That's really why we set it up, if that helps as a background.
It does. And one of the interesting things as well, I mean, people are in the service still contact you, don't they? So they can be in the service and they can contact you and they can say, what do I do about this?
Yeah, yes. Before I get some detail there, what I was missing, bear in mind, this sounds arrogant, I don't wish it to be, but I've been privileged to serve, support, lead, command brilliant people, often on operations, arguably in hostile environments. I would say my resilience is generally pretty good, generally.
Yeah.
The service and the taxpayers invested a lot in me to be that. When this happened to me with my chain of command, I can't tell you how it hit me, but it was like a Kevin Peterson full toss on the leg side right into the grounds. It hit me for 6 because I didn't expect that turn of values.
Sure.
I expected them to do the right thing and they were 180 off from doing it. But it led me to think, I wonder what pressures they're under up in the headquarters. It was interesting. But the point of that moment for me was at my level, again, not wishing to sound arrogant, if a station commander or a relatively senior executive in an organization can't find what I call a safe space for an unsafe conversation, and I couldn't, that to me is a big problem for the organization as a whole. Because it would suggest to me that you're psychologically unsafe as an organization when your people aren't feeling safe. That is a problem for any big organization.
Well, this is why I left.
I
mean, this jet here, this is what we shouted about from 2011. I started a whole website about it. Fast Jet Performance was started with essays writing about, guys, we're doing the right thing here. That was a jet we bought back in 2011. We bought into service. We were still writing the syllabus at the same time. Military flying training had been privatized. No one was listening to the instructors. And part of the actual contract that came from the military flying training system through Ascent Flight Training and everyone else that was involved, it didn't actually provide for any instructors. It provided for students. They expected the service to train instructors. It was an oversight, but either way, my instructors, I couldn't train on the airplane. So I had the same small bunch of instructors training all the students. And eventually, after shouting about it and getting, I went back to, I did a service inquiry and we met some aviation psychologists on there and they were doing a free review, an operational event analysis on all the squadrons if you asked for it. I pressed my boss again and again and again saying, look, we are unsafe. I'll tell you why we're unsafe, because my men are coming to me saying they're expecting a fatality. And we did have an Australian with us at one point, just having he was on the Hawk 127, came over. He was flying with us on an air combat sortie. 2 jets came together like this. And in the debrief, he said, I know I'm not supposed to be here, guys. I'm just a pilot from Australia, just looking at what you're doing with your jet. But this is bollocks. What you guys have done here should never happen. Like, we almost died today. Like, we almost lost 2 jets and 4 instructors. And then when I heard that as OC standards, with my men coming to me and saying, we messed up today, we are not current enough to be doing this, and we just had another instructor from Australia tell us what we're doing is fundamentally wrong. I went to the boss again and said, boss, get this operation event analysis. It's a free look at how we're doing things. It's completely free. You can have it. You can do what you want with it. And eventually he didn't do that. He didn't do anything at all. Eventually I had to go to the station commander and say, what you do is you write an email, don't you, to the station commander. You say, I'm now telling you that as your officer commanding all standards of flying and training on the largest squadron in the Royal Air Force, we are we're fundamentally unsafe. This is what we're doing. We're fundamentally unsafe. I've got all my instructors telling me what you're going to do about it. Eventually, the boss did let this happen, and they interviewed everyone for 2 weeks. And in early 2013, I believe it was, we shut the squadron down for 6 months. And all we did was instructor training. And course 1 stopped. You know why course 1 finished? Is because I had 4 people on it, and that course 1 had to finish because I had to prove that the flying training system was safe. We should have had fatalities on this aircraft. And if we had, then there would have been men in the chain that would have been responsible for that. And so that, I look at that, why I wasn't, I didn't go any further in my career, Graham. That was the end of me.
One could argue that was the start of you. You defined your own person. I look at you now. The key words there to me, Tim, are, and if we try and structure maybe the next half hour on this, is reputational pressure,
sure,
operational pressure, and the importance of standards that keeps it safe because of those pressures.
Sure,
because they're competing pressures, and we should recognise, and you've been there. The last, for most of my adult life, the armed forces and the headquarters and defence and the MOD and all the supporting agencies, the civil servant element within it, the contractorisation of it. Defence has been under, since 9/11, it's been under intense operational pressure for a protracted period. It's been under an awful lot of financial pressure for a long period. And as a result, it's been undertaking a lot of transformational pressure for a long period. And if you remember your students, when you're an instructor, when your students under pressure, when it becomes a bit too much, you start seeing a degradation of performance.
You do.
You'll see it. But you're in the privileged position of being in the back seat quietly, watching, observing, and you'll continue to do that until a point where it's unsafe. And when it's unsafe, you'll intervene to prevent the accident.
Yeah.
And that's worth remembering, that basic discipline. And it helps. If I can just give you a short 1-minute tale of the best thing I learned in my 4 years of flying training, right through to fast jet training and TAC weapons. It was a guy, he won't mind me saying this if he's known. I don't know if you knew a guy called Dickie Cattrall.
I didn't know. But
he ended up on JAGs, and I think he was a JAG guy eventually. But he was he was a creamy instructor, so he was streamed off from fast jet training back into the training system, and he picked me up in my early stages of flying training. And he was one of these, to me, really cool instructors because he didn't say much. He was great fun on the ground, but in the air, he really didn't say much. He expected you to know your stuff, he expected you to be prepared, and he expected you to perform. And if you weren't performing, he'd try and help you to understand why. Sure. It was great. And we're coming back into the base. We're cleared to 2,000 feet to join the radar pattern. The aircraft's cruising, everything's fine. I feel I'm in control. It's not way ahead of me. We're in cloud. It's okay. Everything's safe. I feel cool. It's all right. I'm expected to turn left for the pattern in a minute. We're just cruising. And then he said something that was just a question that said, what height were we cleared to? Thinks bubble, student, 2,000 feet. We're at 2,000 feet. Why is he asking me that? I think maybe he's not set his altimeter. Duh. What is he doing? I cruise along. 10 seconds later, 20 seconds later, he says, what height were we cleared to? Why is he asking me this? 2,000 feet. Right. Keep going. And he says, what height are we at? Okay, we're at 2,000 and a smidgen. We're at 2,050 feet, give or take. Come on. Okay, it's 2,000 feet. It's not a smidgen or a bit. It's 2,000 feet. Are you telling me you haven't got the skill to fly at 2,000 feet? Right. Okay. So when he said that, I then thought, all right, I'll wait for him and get back. And you can imagine what happened. We crashed through 1,800 feet to 2,200 feet.
Yeah.
The pilot induced oxygen. It was a flipping disaster. That approach was a disaster. But what he taught me, far more than the sortie, he taught me about never accept mediocrity. Never. Because if you're not good enough to deliver to a threshold or a value or a precise point in moment of time, you're probably in the wrong profession.
That's
if you can fly at 2,050 feet, you should fly at 2,000 feet. That's what you were cleared to. That was the handshake. That was the agreement. Yeah. Do it. And that's what it taught me. It was one of the most defining points of my lifetime, actually, even though it sounds dramatic, because he taught me about the pursuit of excellence, not perfection.
Yeah.
Because that in itself causes problems later. But if you can pursue excellence and you're capable of pursuing it, then you're obliged to do it, given the profession that you're in. You're obliged to do that. And that was that's why I talk about standards. When you're talking about standards, as soon as you lower them, because of those operating challenges, professional challenges, financial challenges, whatever they might be, organizational challenges, once they erode, how do you know where they take you? You wouldn't know the standards lowering because you're fighting fires all the time. And it goes back to Dickie Cattrall. You need a bloke in the back to say, what were we cleared to? Just to remind you. And that is really, I remember that moment to why we set up to try and help defense leaders, just to remind them what was the mission. Because which part of the mission that you're doing said erode the values of the service, erode your values-based thinking, and trash out your people whilst you're doing it. Which bit of that are you doing? And which bit of that have you forgotten?
You know, yeah.
As an annoying instructor behind you, which bit of that can't you do? That's really what.
Well, this is why I call it fast jet performance. That's why the company name is Fast Jet Performance. It's that attainment of excellence, isn't it? That's the whole point. Is we don't accept mediocrity. That's why I stand in front of the flag here. I'm proud of that flag. I get called a nationalist all the time. It's my flag. It's the flag. I stand in front of the flag. I'm proud of the flag, and I'm proud of all these aircraft here. Now, I was quite lucky in a way, Graham, because I didn't go to Cranwell. I went to Dartmouth, and Dartmouth was very old school at that time, and they actually instilled something called integrity into us. Now, my issue with the Royal Air Force, when you look at RISE, of course, respect, integrity, service, and excellence, there is integrity in there. And yet, I must admit, I'm not going to go against every boss I was ever under, because that's not fair, and it's absolutely not fair, because one of my bosses was the Chief of Air Staff, Mike Wigston. He was my boss on 12 Squadron on this big jet up here. I like Mike Wigston. He's a very good man. He's obviously played a very solid game to get where he is. But I do like the guy. You know, I've got him on my phone here somewhere. You know what I mean? But I did work under some bosses. One of the ones I mentioned, unfortunately, on this airplane, who was lucky that he didn't have a fatality on his squadron. And that's exactly what you're talking about, because he wanted to get through that tour as quickly as he could, and get out of there. Someone that's suffering at the moment, I think, is the director of flying training, Jamie Hunter. Again, another one of my bosses, and I do like Jamie Hunter. My wife knows his wife, and he's a nice guy, don't get me wrong. Look at the flying training system he's got now. We've got a comment here from Callum. You know, imagine only doing 4 years in flying training. 7 years at best these days. I try and hold the Royal Air Force to account. Having been in it for 20 years or 5 years in the Air Force and 15 years in the Royal Air Force, I left because of what you're talking about. Okay, it wasn't up to my standards anymore. I had standards, and the Royal Air Force was failing. Now, that's not a very nice thing to say, but I've got 2 commissioning certificates here from the Queen on the wall over there, and she expected something from me, and I was unable to deliver that under the service as it was when I left. I was unable to deliver it. Okay, so I use Fast Jet Performance. I use Facebook to try and say to the Royal Air Force, look, there's ways we can do this better. And then they always roll out Gaz Coleman or someone to come and write a spiel against.
I find the whole thing fascinating for many reasons, but fundamentally, you and I, you'll be younger than me, but I grew up in the abacus era, before computers were a common word.
Right.
I did the times table until I was blue in the face, and often in a Greek language or an Arabic language. But I've seen the intervention in computers and the internet, and it's put us in what I loosely call the information age. Mm. And we haven't yet got to the knowledge age, because the imposter to this is the disinformation age.
Sure.
And what that taught me, especially in my tours in the headquarters in the RAF, NATO, and in MOD, and on operations, for the life of me, Tim, when I was on operations, I couldn't see a clear line or a clear directive from the strategy to the activity. I couldn't see it. The activity we were doing didn't necessarily directly or even indirectly contribute to the strategy. It was just an activity. And that led me to get more interested in the importance of reputation when the organization is under stress.
Yeah.
And that's not true of defense. It's true of today in the information age. You see it in government, not just in the UK. It's a global problem as a result of the information age, where the leaders, I'm not criticizing them, it's an observation, the leaders appear to focus more on the reputation of the organization that they head up at the expense of the people that create that reputation. And to me, when I go back to basics in terms of leadership, command, and management, when you bring those three contributing factors to performance together, the minute you lose the point of people and the value of people, and you focus on your reputation, you've lost the organization. The minute you cross that line. And that's why we set up the organization. It was to allow people to be heard, because we fundamentally respect, our views might differ, that's irrelevant. I want you to be heard. I don't care of your orientation or your color or your background or your gender, it's irrelevant to me. I just see you as a person adding value. And I want to know your potential.
Absolutely.
But the minute you stop empowering these people and you don't give them a voice, the minute you've compromised the very thing you're trying to protect, which was your reputation. And that, to me, was a problem for any organization and any chief executive who's wanting to do the right thing, but it was challenged with all these competing pressures. So to go back to a question you asked ages ago that I didn't answer, who comes to us? It's been astonishing and quite disturbing and definitely distressing, because we get, and increasingly so, we get requests for support from the whole military community. Might be widows, mothers, families, daughters, sisters, brothers, whatever, serving personnel, veterans, retired personnel, parliamentarians, ministers, including senior service staff, who even at 1-star level discreetly come to us because they don't feel safe to tell their 2-star or 3-star what they want to say. And you think, and the biggest thing that hit me here, Tim, when I set this up was a young soldier reached out to me asking for support. Okay, this was before COVID, so we make the point of meeting everyone where we can, because trust is a big thing, and that requires a relationship.
Yeah.
And this guy said he wanted to meet me in London. Well, that's okay. I'll do that. I'll find a way. We met in a church, very neutral, and he was a black soldier, serving soldier, and he was giving me some really sensitive stuff on the situation that he was in. And it was really humbling to be invited to help him out. It just, whilst I was listening, for the life of me, I thought, you know what, I'm a complete stranger. You don't know me. You don't know my background. You don't know what I'm about. I'm nothing to you. But yet you're trusting me. This goes back to that offer of service. You're trusting me to support you. Where is your chain of command in this bit? Because you should be, obviously, you should be having this conversation with your chain of command.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't trust my chain of command. And that's become a recurring theme from every individual across the whole military spectrum, is there seems to be an erosion of trust in the chain of command. And I use that language deliberately because the chain of command doesn't actually exist. What exists is people who are senior to you. And if you're losing trust in the chain of command as an entity, effectively the person who's your boss, who's done nothing necessarily wrong, you're not giving them a chance to fix it. But by association and by reputation, they're now tarnished and contaminated with that loss of trust, which is why I revert back to the offer. It's so black and white. It's so straight in its talking. It says will and must. And that, I think, is a useful introduction again for defense, because defense, like any organ, it can drift from its values. And that's why we talk about an illusion of justice.
Yeah.
It matters in a modern world, especially for the armed forces, which is an important part of government as a diplomatic arm. We're trying to deliver on things like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 16, which talks about justice and fairness and society and strong institutions. Well, if we haven't got that ourselves in the UK, in arguably the primary institution, what chance have we got of delivering these events and effects on a global scale? What chance have we got for the UK to contribute to that as a force for good? So when you backtrack on that, it comes right back to Dickie Cattrall. There's no place for mediocrity in a professional organization. It doesn't mean that we beat each other up. when we fall short of it, you just ask a question, as Dickie did. And what we're about and what the complaint policies are about, it's not meant to annoy people or look for compensation. It's not supposed to be like that. The complaint is simply someone asking a question. That's it.
Yeah.
Just like an aircrew debrief. Well,
Yeah.
why are we so resistant to someone who was serving with us asking a question? And I suppose that the most distressing thing that came to me in this organization was, bear in mind, this was a serving RAF experienced officer. When that person comes to me and says he had a problem, I said, well, just speak to your chain of command and sort it. The response was, I don't feel safe and I don't trust them to sort it. Well, then we've lost it then. If a serving RAF officer doesn't have that relationship, then your person at the bottom, where I came from, you got no chance. No chance. And that to me was a problem for the organization as a whole. That is a challenge. And to me, it's also an opportunity, because we think we've got, from a lot of people we work with, we think we've got some solutions to this. We believe we've got that.
Well, I mean, I agree, because when we're looking at, I mean, remember the report we talked about flying training, where they print this report, the report went to the boss sat on the report, and we kept saying, well, boss, we've got to do something with the report. We're going to do something with the report because the report says we're not safe. Sat on the report because he was coming to the end of his, his tour, basically. And then, of course, the only way we managed to get the report up the chain was it got leaked off the squadron. So a report was leaked off the squadron, ended up in the director of flying training's desk, who went, hang on a second, how come you haven't told me about this? I've got a squadron here that's about a fatality, and you haven't sent me this report, and it's a year old. And then director of flying training shut the squadron down here for 6 months, allowing me and my team to train the other instructors up. And we stopped the students flying. After about 4 months, the students were bored, and we were like, to start flying again, you know what I mean? Because having a bored student is rubbish. And we had enough instructors then, and we carried on then in a safe manner from there forward. And I can understand it. If I was a boss as well, I'm not saying I would have done the thing, because I didn't do the thing, because obviously sacrificed my career probably. But I can understand if you invest that much of your life in a career, that boss had probably done 20, maybe 25 years by then. All he's got to do is let the next boss release that report. I mean, it's not right.
Yeah.
He might get away with it.
Yeah, I heard. Talk about language for a moment.
Go on.
The importance of language. There was another instructor. These were gods in every way. There's another guy you might have heard of, John Cunningham, JC, who became an FTS boss, but he was creamy again, like Dickie. Brilliant bloke, taught me loads. I met him a few years later, and I was talking to him, and we were talking about professional challenges, and I termed my people under my command. I used the word resource.
Yeah. And
he looked at me and he started laughing. I thought, what are you laughing at? He said, you seem to have used headquarters language where you started titling your people as resource. Yeah. Well, they're people. Obviously they're people. He said, yeah, but language matters. If you use resource in front of your people, they're going to think they're suddenly a currency. It was like a punch. There's no end of a lesson with a QFI. 20 years later, he's teaching me again something that's important. And that made me think, do you know what? I've become a consequence of my headquarters staff tours over a period of a professional career. The word that hit me when I was in the MOD that I'll never forget was called the bow wave, where if you don't do something during your period of obligation or responsibility, when you don't do the right thing, it creates a bow wave for the next person. And the bigger it gets, the more unmanageable it becomes. In their period of performance, their annual appraisal, for example, they got no chance of sorting it, so they're not going to do it. That was a big lesson of language in the MOD. And in the headquarters, especially in command, I saw this, was the word natural wastage. Have you ever heard of that word?
Yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
Natural wastage is effectively an economical approach to reduce the number of people we've got in the organization. Natural wastage, so redundancy, retirement, discharge, medical discharge, whatever it might be. But just the word natural wastage, it's quite offensive.
It's horrible.
We're talking about people
absolutely
who have lives and families that the offer of service is all about. I don't see the word natural wastage in the offer, nor do I see resource. I see defence, trust, fairness, critical. So that taught me a lot about language and the importance of it. And if you can't, this is another thing I learned, and that's what J4T is about. The organisation isn't about justice for troops. It's just a name that we thought was appropriate for what we're trying to do. It does what it says on the box, or tries to. The organisation is about the people who come to us. We're trying to give them a voice, because the organisation is about people, each one of them. We give them a voice so they're heard. And a classic example would be a young lady, Justine Montgomery. You could see how this could happen. Joins the Air Force, up for the fight. Something goes wrong, an injury during phase 1 training at Halton. These things happen.
Yeah.
She's cool with these things happen, just like operators are cool with things go wrong that could take your life. You put your life on the line. What we're not cool with is the actions and inactions of the organisation after that incident. We're not cool with that, because that's a choice. That reflects individuals choosing to do the wrong thing. And Justine is an example of a lot of people choosing to do the wrong thing over a long period.
Right.
And nothing personal to Mike Wigston. We grew up together in flying training as well. Top guy. But when we write to the chief of an organisation, who happens to be Mike Wigston, on an issue that impacts on her, that impacts on the reputation of the service, we reasonably expected a response from someone. When we write to Caswo, his warrant officer, to represent the junior ranks on behalf of Justine, we reasonably expected a response from Caswo. I wouldn't accept no response. We wouldn't accept that, because that effectively is telling Justine to push off.
Yeah, of course.
It's a double injustice. It goes against the offer of service. It goes against what the Queen has said. She's asked a question and she's waiting for an answer. So because of that, we set up an environment where Justine has now collected her narrative, presented it to the Defence Select Committee in Parliament, who have it, who are looking at it. And that contributes to what we were trying to do to achieve what our objective, which is to contribute to solutions to these challenges that really do plague defence. We worked with senior military staff. So Chief of Defence has accepted this as a problem. He terms it as, it's unusual language for the Chief of Defence to say, this is a no mission fail mission.
Oh, God. No. Oh. You have to explain that to me.
Therefore, success. We better achieve success quickly. And we needed a parliamentary process, because when I looked at what happened to me when I was in command and my own behaviour and the behaviour of my boss, right through to the Defence Council, right through to the 4 stars, right through to the Ombudsman, right through to ministers, everyone was ducking the issue. Everyone. Just swerving. It's like baseball. Yeah. It's just a ball we don't want to bat.
You don't want to touch
that
it.
Worried me from an ethical position. That worried me from the integrities of the service and the values of the service. It worried me that at the top we're doing that for whatever the pressures might be. That worried me. But it led me to look at Parliament as a system, as a mechanism to change those behaviours, on the basis that if you change the law, you change the incentives. And by changing the incentives, you change the behaviours. And that was really then what we saw as an opportunity to work with Parliament and Defence in the legislation that is currently playing through. You could actually create a federation, a union, a representative body, whatever language you want to use, but effectively you need to make sure that the voices of your troops are heard, going right back to the Prime Minister and CDS when they said, we don't have that 20,000-foot overview. Well, we'll give it to you then, because you think you need it. To make strategic decisions about the organisation and its vector of travel safely, we think you need that 20,000-foot overview. So effectively what we've set up as an independent body is that rich picture of what's really going on the ground. It doesn't mean we're right. It's just the individual who's on the front line is trying to tell you there's a problem. And this goes back to, do you remember the Nimrod crash, the tragedy in 2006 in Afghanistan?
That's right, I do,
That led to the parliamentary inquiry, that led to Hatton Cave and his Nimrod review. If that is, we routinely present it back to defence and any organisation, because it's not about an aircraft crash per se. It's about a failure of leadership. It's about a failure of culture. And it's about a failure of priorities, the impact of which was not just the reputational damage to the Royal Air Force and Defence, it was the impact of 14 lives lost and their families. That's the bottom line. And the thing that came out of it, which goes right back to the aircrew debrief, it goes right back to the Queen, right back to the offer. What Hatton Cave talked about as a QC was trying to get an organisation that is focused on blame and protection of a reputation to get it into what is increasingly mature in the flying world, into a questioning culture, into a safety culture, into a just culture. Because if you did that, you would see improvement in retention. You would see improvement in recruitment, people, and you would see an improvement in reputation if you created a questioning culture, just like an aircrew debrief. It's effectively an example of a questioning culture. You're asking me awkward questions that I'm uncomfortable with. I don't know the answer to, and rightly you're saying, well, you better find out, because I don't want you operating with me, because you'll put me in the flipping hill. It's that simple logic, but understanding that the reputational pressures seem to be increasingly consuming the mind of any executive today because of the information age. So I see this in central government, which is why we work with Parliament. We seem to have shifted from a society that was focused on truth and integrity and values. We seem to be now focused on the narrative at the expense of the truth. And that is an opportunity. It's a problem for the next generation coming up before us. But the little a bit I know about your background is you made a choice on a point of integrity to call it as you saw it. And the bit you talked about, the squadron being effectively stood down until you had a safety. How was that experience in terms of an outcome? Was the squadron safer as a result of that decision?
Yes, no one died on any squadron that I was on in the Royal Air Force my entire term. I'm quite proud of that. No one died. And I'm not saying I kept them alive, but I do believe that you bring your own culture to a squadron. And I had 12 men. They were all men. It's not me being sexist. I had 12 men that I was running on sea flight as OC sea flight myself, so OC standards. And those men were responsible for training. And I was able to handpick some of those people. I was quite fortunate. And every one of those men had integrity. That's the whole point why we picked them. And I think with all those men, with those 12 men, we kept the squadron safe. But those are the men that were coming to me before saying, Tim, we are unsafe as a squadron. Fact. And I said, I'm telling the boss, I'm literally telling the boss the same thing, and you're the third person this week that's come to me telling me we're unsafe. And that was the problem. That's why I pushed for the review to come in. And that's why eventually when we eventually managed to get the review in, I think at that point they couldn't have not got the review, and then to have the review sat on, even though everyone had said what they'd said and we'd read the review. In fact, I'll tell you what happened to the review when it first came back. The two psychiatrists, both girls, I knew both girls anyway from a service inquiry I did with the Red Arrows into a death of a friend of mine. They were on that, you form a relationship, they're great girls. And then I just phoned them up. Do you want to come up? Yeah, sure, we'll do it. They've done loads for the Army and for the Navy and everything. And they came up, they did the review, they handed it back to the squadron, and the boss took that report and he wrote all over it and sent it back to them. And they were forced to correct the report. You can't make that up. So we still had the original report, luckily. And we're like, boss, look, I know they've said some things and we've told them these things are the incorrect way of writing a squadron, but these are semantics. But the stuff you're crossing out here, this needs to be left in, boss, because it's factually correct. Of course, it made the squadron look bad, didn't it? And the reason it made the squadron look bad is because we privatized flying training. This is what I talk about a lot. we hadn't, of course. The Ministry of Defence had privatised flying training, but the way it had been done and the way we were rushing, this was the first squadron. And with flying training, technically one at Cold Rose was, but it was, we were the first squadron. So you started jets, it's the wrong place to start. It's just the way it is. And of course, the courseware was still being written as we're trying to teach the first course. So I couldn't even train the trainers for this, because I'm literally trying to say, guys, we haven't written the next phase. And I remember literally holding the instructors and saying, guys, we can't fly this phase because it hasn't been written. So the boss then, I said, boss, don't send our men. We only had male instructors at the time. Don't send the men to a centre in Bristol to write the courseware for them. That is fundamentally wrong. But the boss did. It was the only way that he could keep the course going, because, of course, station commander had said, and DFT had said, get the course finished, because it's a photo op. The contract says. And so I think 4 of my men went down to Bristol and just quickly wrote the courseware for the company, which was patently unfair, of course, but I understand it. I'm not as anti the company as I was. I understand they were stuck as well. And what happened at the Public Accounts Committee, of course, under, I can't remember the QC now, he, of course, said eventually, well, how do I hold the flying training company to account when the Royal Air Force has done a lot of the work for them? And he's right. Absolutely right, which is why you don't do it. You should stop. You should stop the flying. Right. What's the problem? Stop the flying. Yeah,
you touch a point that's that we're very alert of. If you go back to Hatton Cave, to me, it wasn't sold well across defence, because people assumed by the title it was about an aircraft crash. Yes, it was the reason, the causation behind it that matters to anyone in defence. You could be in any part of defence. There is huge value in that report to anyone in defence, indeed any organisation that's focused on performance, success and failure. You would want to read that report, not necessarily the technical detail about the in-flight air-to-air refueling stuff, but you would focus on leadership, risk, recognition of risk, identification of risk, and the cultures that actually think we've done it but haven't done it at all. And there's a real good line in there. The 2 lines that I always go back to as my go-to point about questioning. Questions are the antidote to assumptions. Assumptions so often incubate mistakes. Effectively, it validates the importance of asking the question in order to prevent the organisation making a big mistake. So it's a stitch in time would save a lot of 9 lives. That was important, and to me. And the other thing that hit home was, and you've seen it in the reduction of mass in the armed forces over our lifetime, and the subcontract. I can understand the financial gain, perhaps, of subcontracting out your functions in defence.
I can.
Like any organisation, you can offset those functions to someone else who does that. I get that. But Hatton Cave said, a wise person, I think, in this regard, he said, by all means, subcontract out your functions for economic sense. That's fine. But never subcontract out your thinking or your values at the same time.
Yeah.
Because what he's saying there is, if you're going to get into a relationship with a company that ultimately is delivering your output or contributing to it, you really need to make sure that their values are in accordance with your values, and your values-based thinking isn't going to be trashed by them, where their focus is simply on profit and their shareholder need. You're going to have a friction point. And I think, to me, the flying training system, and you've got a chat there. When I was the base commander, because I was a pilot background, and I held for my own period for 3 flipping years, it was painful, 3 years, but I managed to make myself useful and productive. When I was a base commander, I knew I needed people to do what was effectively emerging tasking. So I know where there's a load of people effectively marking time that actually want to run. They want to be used in a valuable way that's going to be recorded and reported, where they actually might feel part of the team. So I found a whole bunch of students, graduates from Cranwell, pre-flying training or stuck in the system. They were just brilliant people that just wanted to contribute to defence. That's what they joined to do. And we had them doing all sorts of stuff that they probably wouldn't appreciate at the time, but it helped them understand what a team was about, rather than just what a pilot was about. It helped them understand how a unit worked, how a station worked. And the thing that really upset me was some of these individuals, this is 2012, the forecast was they wouldn't be combat ready until something like 2018.
Yeah, that was
2018.
Yeah.
And that made me think, well, by the time you get combat ready, you'll be a junior officer on a frontline squadron, sort of, I don't know, 6 to 9 months in. But if you want a career by the time you're 30, you can forget it. If you're looking to go through the rank system, you forget that through no fault of your own. Whereas the person you graduated with, who in certain branches would have done 6 months and is suddenly phase 2 qualified and now up and running, you're 7 years behind the drag system. And that to me was an example of an organization that is under critical stress, that needs a release point at all ranks, including 4 stars, where they can come to someone who's independent, that understands the wider context, where they can have that safe space for an unsafe conversation. Because it's quite a lonely place. You've heard that issue about command is a lonely place.
Oh yeah, sure, of course I have.
Well, why does it have to be so lonely? Why can't we set up an organization that you can go to and say, look, I've got a problem, I'm thinking about this, I just want to red team it, what do you reckon? Why can't you offer that? Then it's not so lonely. Why can't you do that?
This is what I speak to young pilots about.
That's what we've set up.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, the problem that we've got, I think, this kind of highlights it a little bit here, is I'll put something on my Fast Performance on Facebook here. This was about a young person that had written to me, just informing me how they're doing. And I'm like, okay, fine. They're looking into flying training. What happens, unfortunately, is they will unleash the Gaz. The Gaz Coleman will come on here, of course. I think he's based down in High Wycombe. He's in the Air Force. And he will come in and try and explain from the Air Force's side. And I'll write back to him and I'll say, Gaz, look, do you ever evaluate how you came to have year-long holes in flying training? Because we know now between each EFT, BFT, AFT on this airplane down here, of course, these people are waiting. Well, the last guy I spoke to had a 14-month hold. Some of those students end up in my DCS Shadowland server because their skills are going rusty as hell. They're doing an admin job, whatever, so they come and fly with me, and we do some extra stuff for them. And I say, look, do you ever evaluate how this might have happened, or do you just copy and paste the last excuse? Now, what happens is this normally upsets Gaz. He's a good guy. I've got his number here. He sometimes phones me up. A lot of people do that. So what Gaz will do is write this. And I haven't actually read it yet, but I know what it says. So, and he's right, of course. He's saying, well, hang on, these things weren't forecast. There were microbursts that wrecked helicopters. There were props that fell off some airplane. The NAO came in and dragged it. SDSR, one SDSR do. There's all these things. Why can't we turn around in the military and say, we're kind of struggling here a little bit. You know, there were things we did that we shouldn't have done. We kind of messed up a bit. Yeah, some of things, for every 5 years, government changes, whatever, there's another SDSR. But, you know, we should be doing better because it's taking 7 years to get a young person to the front line, possibly, because they may still fail in the school that I was on and have to go and retread through rotary. Or they're going to be, some of these guys are entering when they're 24. They're not getting to the front line until they're past 30. And, of course, they don't want to be on the front line past 30. They've got families now. They're looking for other jobs. And you're ruining future career opportunities. And that's my argument with it all. That's why I tell people, look, go to the Navy.
Have you come across... Have you come across another bit of language in the headquarters lexicon? Lines to take. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, lines to take. We're giving them in Afghanistan and everything, you know, when we're in Iraq and stuff, and that's what you got to read out. You know what I mean? Yeah,
the ethical problem I've got with lines to take, and I understand the thinking behind it. The challenge I've got with lines to take is it comes back to the offer of service. It's critical to maintain that trust.
Yeah.
If all you're going to give me is the Truman Show of organizational nonsense, I'm not going to believe it. I'm not able to tell you I don't believe it because of the rank gradient, but I'm immediately losing trust, not in you as a person, but in the chain of command. I'm losing it. And once you start losing it, it's like my flying instructor. There is a relationship problem that's fundamentally unsafe if we don't trust each other. Fundamentally unsafe.
Yeah.
And so that's why we thought, you know, you'd be better off. It's a philosophical shift. It takes a bit of bravery, takes a bit of risk, but I think our 4 stars should be up for that. I would expect them to be up for that. I'd rather you just tell us how it is, warts and all. Even if it's bad, even if it's bad press or negative outcome.
Never going to happen. Never going to happen.
The fact you know that, by being open and upfront and transparent and honest, actually the converse is true. We won't like it, sure. The parliamentarians, some of them might not like it, but because you've been open and upfront, you actually enhance your very reputation that you're trying to protect.
Yeah.
Because you restore the sense of trust that, wow, here's a boss that's actually not followed the lines to take and the script and all that nonsense, the narrative. He's actually said, it's like this. This is what we need to do. This is the objective. I encourage you to try and help me do that. I think we need to do that, that, and that. It's telling you how it is. And it comes back to, this is why we set up, Tim. It wasn't about justice for troops. It was about giving these people a voice, which we've got. They're being heard in the places they need to be heard, which isn't necessarily on social media. That's not the audience.
No.
We want them to be heard in positions of power. This was a very deliberate connect and collect power in order to empower people who serve in our armed forces. It was deliberate. And it led to what we set up as an independent defense authority, because Mike Wigston said in his review of 2019, we'll create a defense authority, that sounds great to do all this holistic stuff. The question then is not about should we create a defense authority? That's been agreed by the board. It should be, how independent does that defense authority need to look then?
Yeah, of course.
And I would always want an independent, end-to-end organization that's populated with people like you, Justine, people who know what they're on about, who call it as is, to help the 4 stars get the ground truth, that 20,000 foot overview. Can I just read you one paragraph of what the Independent Defence Authority is about? Yeah,
do you want me to put something up for you, or you got it there?
I'll just read it. See if it resonates, and your team might develop a conversation with offline or later. The point of the Independent Defence Authority is, quote, to provide more cost-effective, independent representation for all uniformed members of the United Kingdom military and veterans in order to enhance the moral component of fighting power. Because we must never forget the purpose of the armed forces as a diplomatic arm, a government arm, potentially is fighting power.
Yeah.
And that's the rub, is I'm okay for questioning, but at a point in time when we say go, we're going.
Oh, 100%. Well, we've all been there. Yeah, we've all been there.
I live in an environment where if you think it's unsafe, question it. But don't tell me about the rations. I'm not interested at the moment. That's not going to change the outcome.
Yeah.
So it goes on to say the objective of this is to better authenticate the authority of the chain of command in order to better deliver critical defense output, because it provides an independent, safe space for an unsafe conversation. That's the point of it.
Yeah,
absolutely. And if you don't have that, effectively it's a bridge. It's just a bridge to allow people who serve to go to the top, to tell it how it is. We don't want to call it whistleblowing because that has a negative connotation. We don't want to call it a union because that has, to some, a negative connotation. We just call it a representative body that allows person over here who's got a safety concern, if need be, because we recognize the competing pressures as you understand in your experience of Valley, they can go straight to the top. So actually, I think that, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying that this situation is wrong, which requires a debate. And that is what we mean about authenticating the authority of the chain of command, because I've been astonished the volume of people that come to us where the common theme, they're not after money, they're not ambulance chasers as a term. They're fundamentally focused on trying to improve defense outcomes. They're loyal to that flag behind you. They're loyal to what they're serving. They're loyal to the people around them, but they're upset with the way they've been treated because lines to take seem to be more important than their well-being. And that's what I've learned about the mental health. It's the incident doesn't kill them. They can absorb that by and large. It's the inactions and actions of the chain of command and the organization after the incident that can take people to a really dark place. And we've lost a few, sadly.
Yeah.
Not because they wanted, it's not because they wanted to take their life. They didn't set out to do that. Fundamentally, it's because they're not living the life they set out to live. It's that leaves them isolated, abandoned, feeling alone, under pressure, nowhere to turn, in a veteran sector that's extremely clumsy and clunky. We just wanted what I call VFR direct. Visual flight rules apply. There's your target. There's your problem. Go straight to it. Get rid of all the paraphernalia on the process. Just go straight to it. And we've got an organization with people who are generally serving or served. They understand the language. They understand the wider context. And they offer enormous value. It's not for me to judge that. It's for the people who have come to us. They'll tell you how it is. But that's really where we are. And something's wrong, Tim, from my perspective. It's also right. When the Defence Select Committee come to me, and I get Christmas cards from them, that's bizarre. When the Defence Select Committee come to me and say what we're doing is quote, highly relevant to the UK, that's at odds to elements in the MOD who want to silence us. And by implication, what that means is you're silencing the people who want to be heard. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? That goes to your experience. The consequences of that is it's inherently unsafe to do that.
Of course there's.
Why do that?
It's nice to counsel people, isn't it? I was almost, someone attempted to counsel me, some British Army major attempted to counsel me on social. He wrote to all the companies that were on my website and he told them I was a transphobic bigot and he was raging. It got very angry, in fact. And so I had a letter from my solicitor and I was going to send it in there. And then they said, you're going to have a year of hell and he's going to give you 20 grand. You have to give it to a cat's home and you're going to get a letter of apology from him. And I got a pretty stock letter from the Army Secretariat saying that what he did was unacceptable. But it was a stock letter. I don't think they'd even look at what I sent in. And by the way, this Army major told me to complain at him. He actually sent the address to complain, which was incorrect. And that guy wrote back to me and said, yeah, mate, this was pretty bad for you. No worries. This is the correct address for external complaints. So, and I just put a complaint in. I said, look, you're an idiot. Here's a complaint for you. And you know what's going to happen to that guy? His boss is going to walk in the office and go, mate, delete those tweets, will you? That's what's going to happen. We know it's going to happen like that. And in fact, he did delete the tweets. They're all down now. So
you touched on the point. I sent you a letter. It might be, perhaps pick it up. It's the thing that troubled me. And bear in mind, I was a respondent to a complaint as well as a deciding officer and a commanding officer. I had a couple of complaints against me, and I'm cool with that. Let's discuss it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I offended you. Let's just try and sort that out. What I found astonishing when I was a respondent to a complainant who happened to be a female serving officer, it went right to my core, is because I was the respondent and a commanding officer, I suddenly got the secretariat in the headquarters writing to me with emails that were telling me how they're configured to defeat the complainant.
Just serious, that's the thing?
I was astonished. It was based on procedural manipulation of a policy that we all trust in, or did. It was based on denying the individual jurisdiction, which in turn would deny scrutiny, which would therefore protect the reputation. It would deny litigation and therefore cost, which would impact on the economic element of the reputation, and fundamentally silence the individual. And we call that supporting fairly our people. It couldn't be further from what I'm about. It couldn't be further from what Mike Wixton was about. But that's the headquarters doing it. And I objected very strongly to it. But years later, it led to I raised a complaint against my two-star, which I didn't want to do. He just refused a conversation. Well, I need that conversation with you. That there's something fundamentally wrong here when we're denying a 13-year-old a chance to be heard. That's fundamentally wrong to me. She's part of our future generation. This isn't right. If you're not going to listen to me, I didn't want to do that. I'll put in a complaint that allows you to respond. You should be able to do that. That didn't work. This complaint went on for years and years and years, and it led to the Ombudsman getting involved. And the most astonishing thing was the Ombudsman writing. I sent you the letter. She put in letter, by all means put it up.
Yeah, I got
Paragraph 4, if you got it there, Tim.
I got it there right now. I was going to chuck it up here.
It comes back to, it's a fundamental problem with leadership today. She goes in there, paragraph 4, and she talks about compensation. I'm not interested in that. I couldn't give a stuff about the money. I care about the values and the organizational health over time to allow the next generation to come through and enjoy the opportunities that I've been given. That's what I care about. But she put in there, and she's talking about the Air Force Board, the top governing structure of a service, the first independent Air Force in the world. And this is the independent ombudsman saying about that board, quote, "You've simply found a loophole to sidestep." And what is that about? A loophole to
I'm looking
bottom
at this.
para 4. Final sentence.
2, 3, 4. Here. Yeah. They've just explained how they found the loophole to sidestep this and therefore not engage further. How on earth is that even possible? That's the most... Why would they even want to find a loophole to not engage further? That's malicious intent, isn't it? Malicious intent.
Well, no, it's because, as she alludes to there just before that, she said, the Ombudsman said, it was very clear the intent was for, quote, a significant award to be made beyond the MOD's delegated authority. And what she's saying there is when the MOD pays someone something because of something they've done wrong, or the Navy or the Army, there's a capitation that I think it's as low as £500. If you've got to cough up more than £500, you need to go to the Treasury to explain why, and rightly so, because that's public money.
Yeah.
So if you can keep it under £500, the Treasury aren't going to ask you any questions, and that's going to be useful when you're in an argument with the Treasury asking for several £billion on top of the budget they've already invested in you. You don't want that scrutiny that effectively leaves you with a narrative will say, well, if you can't look after your people, when we've invested in these people, you can't look after the equipment, and therefore we're not going to give you the equipment program that you're telling us to fund. It's really just as basic as that. But it shows that the reputational pressure and the economic need to retain that reputational perception is far greater than the needs of the service person. And that's why you see that language there, find a loophole to sidestep. And it's that bit in your response you got from the Army, on the Army Major, everything you've got in that letter as a response is an example of the organization finding a loophole to sidestep its professional responsibility.
Isn't that strange, though?
Well, the consequence of that, as you'll appreciate, from a safety point of view, imagine at the basic level of flying, pilot, supporter, engineer, whatever, the minute you start finding a loophole to not do your job, the risk, it's an unknown risk in the organization that at some point is going to backfire big time. And to put that in perspective, it's disappointing. It's very humbling for me to be invited by the Defence Select Committee to speak to them in an oral hearing in the coming weeks on an inquiry that they set up about women in defence. I'm neutral on gender. To me, if you're in the services, you get my full attention all the time. Veteran or not, you get my full attention. Woman or not, it doesn't matter. You have my full attention. It's humbling when they ask me to support it and then brief them on an oral hearing. And it questioned, well, are you sure you got the right guy here? There are better people around. I said, no, you're doing something that's highly relevant. Okay. What troubled me, I didn't know this, but this inquiry that's about to become public, it's been apparently, quote, the most successful parliamentary inquiry ever, based on the volume of submission.
Wow.
And the people that have contributed to it, they won't be saying it's brilliant, and some will be, and we want that. But a lot of them will be saying this happened and it shouldn't have happened. So it's not, to me, it's not successful. That's a very clear failure over time. Why? because consistently at board level over time, the pressures of the organisation, the pressures of scrutiny, the pressure of regulation has got the better of us at a leadership level, where we've chosen to find a loophole to sidestep what matters, which goes back to the offer. It goes back to Dickie Cattrall. If you're prepared to fly around 2,050 feet, you're accepting mediocrity. Well, the consequences of mediocrity will lead to, inevitably, accidents, lives lost, Nimrod, not to mention the plethora of issues that are out there. And that's really why we felt, it goes back to, I don't know if you remember a guy called Bishop Desmond Tutu, the human rights activist in the southern continent. He said something that is helpful here, I think, and always useful for anyone going through something demanding like flying training or medical training or anything that's tough, or just education is tough these days.
Yeah.
He said, there comes a point where we've got to stop pulling people out of the river, and we need to go upstream to understand why they're falling in.
Well, it makes sense. Yeah.
And to that's where we thought, okay, we're at downstream helping with others to pull people out of the river. I tell you, we've got to. Someone came to me in a couple of days. He's been in. I won't tell you the circumstances, but he was sexually assaulted in the RAF in 1998, and in 2021, he's still trying to sort it out. And that is someone who's been in that river for most of his adult life in our Air Force. This is not acceptable to us. But it's pointless sorting out there. He's a symptom of a bigger problem. You need to go upstream, just like a QFI would, and think, why are you doing that, mate? What's going on in your head? What pressures have you got? Have I trained you sufficiently? Have I supported you? Have I supervised you? Is the environment right? All these factors contribute to a safe space. And that's why I remember people like Dickie Cattrall and JC and many others. The reason why I performed well in that discipline to their standard is because they were brilliant at providing a safe space to allow me to do that. That's fundamentally what they did. They didn't necessarily teach me to fly. Anyone can fly. They taught me to understand the difference between flying and operating.
Oh, yeah.
Which allows you to do what you did to a very high standard in order to take extreme risk in a hostile environment and as best as you can to do it safely. And the minute we lose that ability to do that, the ability of defense to do what we're asking it to do becomes compromised. And that has an impact internationally based on what effectively that flag is all about. So we definitely didn't set up to be annoying, but like any good QFI, Dickie Cattrall, you're probably going to be annoying to me when you ask me repeatedly what height was I cleared to fly at when I think I'm at it. It's what we call good trouble.
Yeah, good trouble.
Makes sense.
It does. It's a great way to. It's a great way to leave this. It is. I mean, that just makes across to me. It means that you're doing the right thing. You're getting at the right people.
Well, yeah. It's as I say, it's. I didn't expect to be doing this in this stage of my life, but I can assure you, it's been humbling to be trusted by people who are in difficulty. That's been an education. We think we add value over time. We certainly have hooked up with people who are capable of helping people out of difficult situations that they're in, including defense. But fundamentally, you learn an awful lot about mental health and the impact of injustice, which comes back to that top headline. The pretense of justice is a disastrous consequence to the organization. If you're going to do it and deliver on the offer, deliver it. That's it. There's no mediocrity in that. And if that means a recalibration in defense, just like the squadron, then you stand down, you take some time out and you sort it out. You don't keep going. It's a recipe for disaster. But as you keep going, it's not so much your reputation you're going to trash, it's the people that you're relying on to deliver the outcomes that you need. And that's really what flying training taught me. That's what my service in the ranks taught me, and in command and in Justice for Troops. The minute you take your eye off people and what they need, and you focus on your reputation, is the minute you destroy the reputation you're trying to protect. So it's a corrective opportunity for any leader, any performance or orchestrated organization, Formula One, banking, government, whatever. If you're focused on performance, Tim understands a lot of that. We think we've got people who understand a lot of that, and that's why we're really privileged to be part of your audience tonight, Tim. It was thrilling to be invited. Thank you.
Oh, you've been very popular down here in the comments, I must admit. I think I've thrown some up. There we go. So here's a good one here for you. Why don't we have politicians and sensible committed, Graham? Well, because you probably never get in, Graham, because you tell too much truth and you know it. Okay. So there is always that, isn't there? There's been some great comments I've been watching down here. There we go. So here's another one. Amazing, very sensitive subjects, handle gracefully without softening the hard points. And that is something that you do so well. I think that's probably why you get the audiences with the people that you do at the very senior levels. And hopefully you've got some people listening to you up there. And I think you have. And, you know, I know it's not going to necessarily be good for a lot of military careers if people were to slow things down and to sort things out, but you might keep some people alive. It's always a bonus if you were going to do that. So, look, thank you for coming on.
I tell you, if anyone's never been to an aircrew debrief, I'm sure the opportunity may be available for anyone, but the power and the benefit of being criticized bluntly, don't take it personally. You should be resilient to take feedback and criticism. It keeps you safe. It keeps the people around you safe, and it makes your organization better. So it goes straight back to Her Majesty. If Her Majesty is comfortable with it, we should be comfortable with it. And that's really what we are. We're not criticizing for the sake of it. That's just annoying. We're trying to contribute a narrative from people who serve in order to make the organization better.
Don't go against the Queen, because she'll get a phone call from her, won't you? She's on my speed dial, and she'll be like, Graham, I told you to do this better. What are you doing? You'd be in trouble, Graham. You know, well, look, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I'm going to drop you down to the green room. I'm going to chat to you in a minute. We're going to try and finish this in 1 minute, 48 seconds. So then we wrap up in the 90 minutes before I get told off. Good. So look, thanks so much.
If I could just say, Tim, it's on behalf of anyone in aviation or anyone who supports aviation, directly or indirectly, that I'm lucky because I survived a flying career, and good mates of mine did not for all sorts of reasons. So this is just a big thank you to anyone who taught me to fly, anyone who teaches flying training today, anyone who flies today, anyone in the engineering staff, all the support staff. Thank you, because you make a difference to keep idiots like me from killing themselves. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I was about to say about when we talk about the engineers as well. That's what, you know, I talk about engineers a lot. It's what kept me alive. I was quite lucky. Right. Look, you don't want to be part of the end dancing stream. All these guys here dance. They know what's coming up. Warrior Wednesday. Let me drop you out, and I'll come and catch you in a second. Well, what a talk, guys. Absolutely amazing to have someone like that on that can actually bring so much truth to what we're trying to get through. And that's all we talk about on Warrior Wednesday, isn't it? Is the integrity side, living with ourselves. Look, I've got 50 seconds left just to tell you about those debriefs that Graham was talking about. If you do fly DCS or want to fly DCS, you will get those debriefs. You'll get the truth bombs dropped on you directly in the DCS server. Okay, if you want to go there, patreon.com/Tim Davies. Get yourself squared away with DCS. And if you know where to find those high-end graphics cards, holler at a brother, because no one can find those unless you're mining enough Krypton. Was it Cryptcoin? Isn't it Krypton? Bitcoin, crypto Bitcoin. Mix up letters. Guys, look, we're going to start dancing, aren't we? Because it is Warrior Wednesday. We are going to try and cut it off in 90 seconds. And what do we talk about at the end of the week? Make sure you, in your businesses and everything else you're doing, okay, put enough effort in, okay, for these last couple of days that the boss thinks you're really working hard and you get a job next week. Because a lot of people out there do not have jobs. Guys, I'll catch you next Wednesday, hopefully. And also look out for the Man Time with Tim Davies sessions that we're going to be having, where we bring men on like Graham, but this time we talk about men's things, okay? Things that affect us as men. And that is, of course, looking after our people in our lives, especially. Guys, I really appreciate it. Dance it out. I want to see you dancing. I can see you dancing. Till next time, Tim Davies Flagship Performance.